Welcome back, American coin hunter. Imagine holding a tiny disc of American history between your fingers, so small that everyday life has made it easy to overlook, so common we barely register its presence in our pocket change, yet so profound in symbolic meaning that it has been minted for well over a century. Imagine it's the year 1986. The streets are filled with music from Walkmans and boomboxes, video arcades are thriving, and everyday Americans are going about their days, making purchases and receiving in return these little copper coins known as pennies. Among them, there's one minted in Denver, marked with a small D under the date, the familiar 1986 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent. To most people in circulation that year, this coin is just another penny. Its face value is literally 1 cent. But for collectors, historians, and numismatists, this tiny coin holds a story that stretches back to the earliest days of the United States Mint and reflects changing metals, design evolution, and the ever-shifting value of currency itself. Today we're going to dive deep into everything about this coin: its weight, its design, its history, and why even ordinary examples can be fascinating, and why extraordinary examples can sell for significantly more than you might expect. Begin by picturing the coin in your mind. It is a small, circular piece of metal, 19 millimeters in diameter, about 3/4 the width of a U.S. quarter, and weighing just 2.50 grams. This weight, now a standard for pennies produced after 1982, was made possible by a shift in materials from heavier, mostly copper coins to a copper-plated zinc core. Instead of the older 95% copper composition that had been used for much of the 20th century, the 1986 cents were struck on zinc planchets with a thin layer of copper bonded over them, giving the coin its familiar reddish color and metallic sheen. This change was driven by economic necessity. The rising cost of copper made it uneconomical to continue producing pennies in nearly pure copper, so the mint innovated with a more cost-effective metal composition while still preserving the visual appearance Americans were accustomed to. The Denver Mint struck nearly 4,442,866,698 coins for circulation that year, making the 1986 D penny extremely common in everyday commerce. From bustling supermarkets to local laundromats, millions of these coins entered circulation, jostling alongside quarters, nickels, and dimes in cash drawers and coin jars across the nation. That on the face of the coin, you see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, one of the most revered presidents in American history, facing rightward. This design traces its roots back to 1909, when Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln was first introduced on the penny to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. It is one of the most enduring and longest-running portraits in U.S. coinage. Brenner's depiction is bold and dignified, capturing Lincoln's thoughtful expression, his prominent cheekbones, and his beard, a feature that was itself a departure from earlier coin portraits in American history. Around Lincoln's head you can read the official motto, "In God We Trust," a phrase that has adorned U.S. coins since the Civil War era and reflects the cultural and historical identity of the nation. To the left of Lincoln's face appears the word liberty, a foundational principle of the country, and to the right, the date, 1986, sits prominently, with the small D mint mark just beneath it indicating it was struck at the historic Denver Mint. The reverse of the coin, that is, the backside, features the Lincoln Memorial, the towering white marble structure that stands on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., a monument built to honor the legacy of Abraham Lincoln himself. Designed by architect Frank Gasparo of the U.S. Mint, the rendition of the memorial on the penny is detailed enough that, under magnification, you can literally see the tiny statue of Lincoln seated within the colonnade. Above the memorial sits the Latin phrase, E pluribus unum, meaning, out of many, one, a motto reflecting the union of states and the diversity of people who make up the United States. Below the building is the denomination, 1 cent, underlining the coin's face value as legal tender in the United States of America. In everyday pocket change, the 1986 D penny is remarkable mostly for its ubiquity and familiarity. To a non-collector, it is worth exactly 1 cent, the minimum unit of U.S. currency. But to collectors looking at condition, rarity, and historical context, this coin can have value that goes far beyond its face value. Today, a standard circulated 1986 D penny is generally worth its face value of 1 cent. Even uncirculated examples, if common red-brown or brown surfaces, might only command a modest premium, perhaps a few cents, or in uncirculated condition, anywhere from roughly 10 cents up to a couple dollars at most in typical market conditions. But let's dive deeper, because the world of coin collecting turns on subtleties that go far beyond the everyday. Numismatists, people who study and collect coins, place a huge emphasis on condition or grade. A coin that looks nearly perfect, with crisp detail, full original red color, and no signs of wear from circulation, is far more desirable than one that has been worn smooth from decades of pocket jostling. In the numismatic grading scale used by professional grading services, a coin can be graded MS65, MS66, MS67, or even higher, with MS standing for mint state, meaning uncirculated. The higher the number, the closer the coin is to perfect. In rare cases, top-grade 1986 pennies have sold for significant amounts. There are documented examples of 1986 Lincoln cents graded MS69, one of the highest numeric grades possible, bringing several $1,000s at auction because of their rarity in that pristine condition. Even so, the story of the 1986 D penny extends beyond basic grading. There are varieties and errors that collectors actively seek out. Errors occur when the mint unintentionally produces a coin with some kind of anomaly, perhaps a misaligned strike, doubled die features, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or other irregularities. Some of these errors are dramatic and obvious. Others are subtle and only visible under magnification. While most error coins still command modest premiums, some rare error types can significantly increase a coin's value. In other words, if you're sifting through your loose change and find a 1986 D penny with something unusual about it, something not typical of the standard issue, it might be worth having it examined by a professional. But let's pause for a moment and ponder the broader significance of pennies like this. In late 2025, the United States officially ended production of the penny after more than 230 years of continuous minting, making pennies newly scarce as collectible artifacts of American monetary history. Auctions of special sets of the final pennies produced before production ceased brought in millions of dollars. Collector interest driven not by face value, but by historical symbolism and nostalgia. One such auction of final cents fetched around $16.76 million in total, with individual sets and coins selling for extraordinary premiums. The 1986 D penny sits in a fascinating place in that timeline. It's neither a colonial-era copper nor a rare pre-1909 wheat penny, nor is it one of the famous error coins that sell for six-figure sums. But it represents the coins that everyday Americans used every day, the heartbeat of circulation for small purchases, for taxis and candy bars, for tipping a street musician or dropping into a wishing well. Its design evokes two of the most iconic American symbols, Abraham Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial. Its metal composition reflects an economic shift in the late 20th century where material costs and production efficiencies became paramount. Its place in history ties to a long tradition of coin production, one that has now changed forever with the penny's retirement. As we continue deeper into the story of the 1986 D 1-cent coin, it's important to slow down and truly absorb what this small object represents beyond metal and minting numbers, because every coin ever struck carries with it the invisible fingerprints of the era in which it was born. The mid-1980s in the United States were a time of economic adjustment, technological acceleration, and cultural confidence. Inflation fears from the 1970s were fading, Wall Street was gaining momentum, and manufacturing techniques at the U.S. Mint were becoming increasingly refined and automated. The Denver Mint, where the 1986 D penny was produced, stood as one of the most important pillars of American coinage, operating massive high-speed presses that struck hundreds of coins per minute, day and night, producing billions of cents that would flow into the bloodstream of the economy. Each blank planchet that would become a 1986 D penny began its life as a zinc core, precisely cut and weighed, then electroplated with a thin but uniform layer of copper. This copper coating is only about 0.008 millimeters thick, yet it gives the coin the warm reddish tone that people instinctively associate with a penny. Once plated, these blanks were fed into the coining presses, where dies engraved with Lincoln's portrait and the Lincoln Memorial came together under enormous pressure, striking the design into the metal in a fraction of a second. That instant of impact is where history is frozen. Every strike slightly different, every microscopic detail influenced by die condition, pressure, alignment, and metal flow. It is in those microscopic differences that collectors find fascination and, sometimes, value. The D mint mark on the 1986 penny is more than just a letter. It is a symbol of Denver's long and proud role in American coinage. The Denver Mint originally opened in 1906, first as an assay office to evaluate gold and silver from the Rocky Mountains. Over time, it became one of the largest producers of circulating coinage in the world. By 1986, Denver was striking billions of coins annually, and the Lincoln cent was its most common output. That little d beneath the date is a silent witness to an industrial process that connected miners, engineers, designers, economists, and everyday citizens in one continuous loop. When you examine a 1986 D penny closely, especially one that has never circulated, the details become surprisingly sharp. Lincoln's coat shows fine lines, his jawline is crisp, and the lettering around the rim is clean and well-defined. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial's columns appear strong and evenly spaced, and with magnification, the tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial becomes visible, a remarkable detail for such a small coin. This level of design complexity is part of what makes the Lincoln Memorial cent such an enduring icon. It is a miniature monument in your hand, a piece of architecture translated into metal, yet most 1986 D pennies did not remain pristine for long. The moment they entered circulation, they began a journey of wear and contact. They slid across counters, clinked against other coins, fell onto pavement, and spent years in pockets, purses, and cash registers. Zinc cores are softer than copper, and once the thin copper plating is breached, the underlying zinc can corrode, turning dark gray or bubbly. This is why truly high-grade examples of post-1982 cents are far scarcer than their massive mintage numbers might suggest. Finding a 1986 D penny that has survived decades without wear, spotting, or discoloration is surprisingly difficult. And this scarcity in top condition is what drives collector interest. Collectors often speak about the color of a penny as if it were a living thing. Red, red-brown, and brown are the three primary color designations used in grading Lincoln cents. A fully red coin retains most of its original mint luster and copper color, glowing with a bright orange-red sheen under light. Over time, exposure to air causes copper to oxidize, turning the surface darker and eventually brown. A 1986 D penny that remains fully red decades after minting is a survivor, and those survivors are the coins that command the highest prices within this date and mint mark. Beyond condition and color, there is the world of varieties and subtle differences that most people never notice. Slight differences in die engraving, spacing of letters, thickness of numerals, and alignment can all create collectible varieties. While the 1986 D penny is not famous for major double dies like some earlier Lincoln cents, minor doubling, die chips, die cracks, and other anomalies do exist. These are the result of dies wearing down, cracking, or being repaired during their service life. Each imperfect die leaves its signature on the coins it strikes, and for some collectors, these signatures are more interesting than pristine perfection. The idea of a penny being worth a staggering sum of money captures the imagination, and throughout history there have been Lincoln cents that sold for extraordinary prices. The legendary 1943 bronze cent, struck accidentally during World War II, has sold for hundreds of thousands and even over $1 million. The 1909 SVDB wheat penny, with its limited mintage and historical importance, is a cornerstone of American numismatics. When people hear stories like these, they naturally wonder whether a modern penny like the 1986 D could one day reach astronomical values. While the realistic market value does not support figures in the hundreds of millions, the psychological appeal remains powerful. It speaks to the human desire to discover hidden treasure in plain sight. What truly gives the 1986 D penny long-term significance is not speculation alone, but context. This coin belongs to the Lincoln Memorial reverse era, which ran from 1959 to 2008. That period spans enormous changes in American society, from the civil rights movement to the digital age. The 1986 D penny sits almost exactly in the middle of that era, bridging earlier copper-heavy cents and later ultra-modern minting techniques. It represents a mature stage of the design, where the mint had refined the look and feel of the coin to a high level of consistency. As time moves forward and pennies disappear from everyday use, coins like the 1986 D will no longer be just spare change. They will be artifacts of a time when cash ruled daily transactions, when children searched couch cushions for pennies, when a handful of copper coins could still buy something tangible. Future collectors may look back on late 20th century cents with nostalgia, seeking the best preserved examples as links to a vanished monetary system. There is also an emotional dimension to coin collecting that cannot be measured in dollars. Many collectors remember their first coin, the one that sparked curiosity. For some, it was a shiny penny pulled from circulation, examined under a magnifying glass, revealing details they had never noticed before. The 1986 D penny has played that role for countless people. It is accessible, familiar, and yet complex enough to reward close study. That combination is powerful, and it ensures that this coin will continue to be discussed, examined, and collected long after it has vanished from circulation. As the story moves forward, it becomes clear that the fascination with the 1986 D 1-cent coin is not driven solely by numbers or metal content, but by the way human perception transforms ordinary objects into symbols of possibility. Coins are among the few artifacts that pass through almost every layer of society. A single penny can move from a federal mint to a banker, from a cashier to a child, from a sidewalk to a collector's album. The 1986 D penny followed this same quiet journey, traveling across states and generations, often unnoticed, yet constantly participating in the rhythm of daily life. Every scrape and mark on a circulated example is a record of motion, of exchange, of hands and places long forgotten. By the mid-1980s, Americans were already debating the usefulness of the penny. Rising production costs and declining purchasing power meant that 1 cent no longer bought what it once did. Yet the mint continued striking billions of them, partly because of tradition, partly because of public attachment. The Lincoln cent had become more than money. It was a symbol of continuity. The 1986 D penny exists right in the heart of that debate, minted during a time when the penny's economic role was shrinking, but its cultural role remained strong. This tension adds another layer of meaning to the coin and subtly increases its appeal to collectors who understand history as much as metal. From a technical standpoint, the quality of strikes in 1986 was generally high, but not flawless. Dies were pushed hard to meet enormous demand, and as they wore down, tiny imperfections crept into the coins. Some 1986 D cents show weak strikes on Lincoln's hair or softness in the memorial steps, while others display sharp, almost metal-like detail. This variability is one of the reasons collectors examine modern cents so closely. When billions of coins exist, the exceptional ones stand out dramatically. A near-perfect strike with full original luster is not just uncommon, it is a statistical anomaly, and collectors are willing to pay for anomalies. The concept of value itself deserves reflection here. Value is not fixed, it is assigned by human interest. A circulated 1986 D penny might be ignored today, tossed into a jar without a second glance. But value can shift with time, scarcity, and narrative. Once pennies stop circulating entirely, people will no longer casually encounter them. At that point, every Lincoln cent becomes a historical object rather than spare change. Coins like the 1986 D, which were once overwhelmingly common, may gain new attention simply because they represent an era that no longer exists. This is how ordinary objects slowly migrate into the realm of collectibles. Within the collector community, there is also the concept of registry sets, where collectors compete to assemble the highest graded examples of each date and mint mark. In these competitive environments, even a date as common as 1986 D can become surprisingly valuable if it is among the finest known examples. When only a handful of coins achieve top grades, demand can dramatically outstrip supply. Prices rise not because the coin is old or rare in absolute terms, but because perfection itself is rare. This phenomenon explains why some modern pennies have sold for thousands of dollars, defying the expectations of people who assume age alone determines worth. Another aspect that fuels fascination is the emotional power of discovery. Many collectors dream of finding a valuable coin in everyday change. In the 1986, D penny often appears in these stories because it is so familiar. The idea that something overlooked for decades could suddenly be recognized as special taps into a deep human desire for hidden treasure. Even if the odds are slim, the possibility keeps people searching, inspecting, learning. In this way, the 1986 D penny becomes a gateway into numismatics, drawing newcomers into a world where history, art, and economics intersect. There is also the global perspective to consider. American coins circulate far beyond U.S. borders through tourism, trade, and migration. A 1986 D penny might have traveled overseas in a pocket or suitcase, becoming an ambassador of American imagery in a foreign land. To an international collector, the Lincoln cent represents American identity distilled into metal. Lincoln's portrait, the memorial, the mottos, all convey ideals that resonate worldwide. This global curiosity adds another subtle dimension to the coin's long-term collectability. As decades pass, fewer high-quality examples remain. Zinc cents are particularly vulnerable to environmental damage. Humidity, improper storage, and simple neglect can ruin a coin's surface. This means that while billions were minted, the population of attractive, problem-free specimens steadily declines. Time itself becomes a filter, quietly removing coins from the pool of potential collectibles. Those that survive intact become representatives of their year, carrying the visual language of the 1980s mint into the future. When people speak in exaggerated terms about massive values, it often reflects excitement rather than market reality. Still, that excitement has meaning. It shows that even the smallest unit of currency can inspire imagination and curiosity. The 1986 D penny may never realistically command hundreds of millions of dollars, but its true worth lies in what it represents: continuity, change, and the enduring human habit of assigning stories to objects. In that sense, its value is not just measured in money, but in memory and meaning. And as this exploration continues, there is still more depth to uncover. The future of modern coin collecting, the shifting perception of small denominations, and the way coins like the 1986 D will be remembered when they are no longer part of everyday life. As we move further into this journey, the 1986 D 1-cent coin begins to feel less like a simple object and more like a quiet witness to transformation. Money is one of the few human inventions that directly touches almost every life, every day, and the penny has always been at the very bottom of that system, humble yet essential. In 1986, when this coin was born, the United States was balancing tradition with modernization. Credit cards were becoming more common, electronic systems were slowly entering banking, yet cash still ruled daily transactions. The penny was still expected to perform its role, however small, and the 1986 D cent did exactly that, slipping unnoticed into circulation while carrying the weight of national symbolism. Collectors often talk about survival rates, and this concept is especially important for modern zinc cents. While billions were minted, survival in collectible condition is far lower than many people imagine. Zinc reacts aggressively when exposed to moisture once the copper plating is compromised. A single microscopic break in that copper skin can allow corrosion to spread beneath the surface, creating bubbles, streaks, or dark patches. Over decades, this chemical reality silently destroys countless coins. So when a 1986 D penny appears today with smooth surfaces, strong luster, and intact color, it represents not just careful minting, but decades of protection, whether intentional or accidental. The idea of protection itself is interesting. Many uncirculated 1986 D pennies survived simply because they were set aside without anyone realizing they might one day matter. Rolls were saved by banks, by collectors, by ordinary people who liked the shine of new coins. Some were tucked into drawers, some sealed in plastic, some forgotten in old boxes. Time passed, and without effort or intent, these coins escaped the damage of circulation. In hindsight, their preservation feels almost miraculous, like a message from the past that arrived intact simply because no one disturbed it. There is also a philosophical side to coin collecting that becomes clearer when we examine coins like the 1986 D-penny. Humans are storytellers by nature. We look for meaning, patterns, and significance even in objects designed to be uniform. A penny, identical to billions of others, becomes special when we assign it a narrative. Maybe it was the year someone was born. Maybe it was the last year before a major life event. Maybe it represents an era remembered with nostalgia. These personal connections quietly increase a coin's perceived value, even if the market price remains modest. From a market perspective, modern cents challenge traditional ideas of rarity. In earlier centuries, low mintages defined scarcity. With coins like the 1986 D-penny, scarcity is defined by condition and demand rather than production numbers. This shift reflects a broader change in numismatics, where collectors increasingly focus on perfection, surface quality, and originality. A flawless modern coin can be rarer than a worn 19th century piece simply because modern coins were never meant to be saved in perfect condition. The role of professional grading services has also reshaped how coins like the 1986 D-penny are perceived. Encapsulation in protective holders, numerical grades, and population reports create a structured marketplace where even small differences matter. A 1-point difference on the grading scale can mean hundreds or thousands of dollars. This system adds legitimacy and clarity, but it also introduces competition, turning coins into benchmarks of excellence. In this environment, a top-graded 1986 D-penny becomes more than a coin. It becomes a trophy. There is something deeply human about this pursuit. The search for the best example of something common reflects a desire for mastery and order. It's not enough that a coin exists. It must be the finest known. This mindset elevates coins like the 1986 descent from background noise to objects of intense scrutiny. Under magnification, every line, every field, every hint of where is analyzed. The ordinary becomes extraordinary through attention at the same time. There is a quiet irony in the penny story. While collectors debate grades and values, society at large moves away from the very idea of small change. Inflation erodes purchasing power, and digital payments reduce the need for physical coins. The penny, once indispensable, becomes symbolic. In that symbolism, coins like the 1986 D take on a new role as historical markers. They remind us of a time when physical money mattered more, when value had weight and texture. The future will likely reshape how we look at these coins. Children growing up without pennies in circulation may view a 1986 D cent as something exotic, a relic from a bygone era. What was once common becomes curious. What was once ignored becomes studied. This is the natural life cycle of many everyday objects, and coins are no exception. The passage of time transforms utility into nostalgia, and nostalgia into collectability. The 1986 D-penny also invites reflection on scale. Billions of coins, each nearly identical, yet each with a unique path. Some were lost, some destroyed, some preserved. Some sat unnoticed in jars, others traveled across continents. Each coin's journey diverged the moment it left the mint. This idea, that mass-produced objects still live individual lives, adds depth to their story. It reminds us that history is not only written in grand events, but in small, repeated actions as this narrative unfolds. The 1986 D1 cent coin stands as a quiet example of how value evolves. Not every coin needs to be rare to be meaningful. Not every object needs a high price tag to deserve attention. Sometimes, the real worth lies in connection, to history, to memory, to the simple act of holding a piece of the past in your hand. And with that understanding, the story continues, moving closer to the way future generations will interpret and cherish these small copper-colored witnesses of another time. As we go even deeper, the 1986 D1 cent coin begins to reflect not just history and metallurgy, but the psychology of collecting itself. There is something powerful about the smallest denomination of money surviving the longest in memory. The penny is often the first coin a child recognizes, the first object used to teach counting, saving, and value. A 1986 D-penny may have passed through countless young hands, been dropped into piggy banks, used in school projects, or pressed into soft surfaces to make impressions. Those early experiences quietly anchor the coin in personal memory, long before anyone thinks about rarity or market price. Time has a way of changing how we see such objects. What once felt disposable becomes precious simply because it no longer belongs to the present. The 1986 D-penny is now approaching 4 decades of age, old enough to belong to a different generation. People who were adults in 1986 now speak of that time with reflection, and people born later view it as history. Coins bridge these perspectives. They are physical links that allow someone today to touch something that circulated in another era. That physical connection is something digital currency can never replicate, and it adds emotional weight to even the most common coins. There is also an educational aspect to the 1986 D-penny that often goes unnoticed. Through this single coin, one can explore economics, chemistry, art, politics, and industrial design. The switch to zinc cores tells a story about resource management and rising costs. The continued use of Lincoln's portrait speaks to cultural continuity and respect for historical figures. The Lincoln Memorial on the reverse connects money to national monuments and shared identity. In this way, the coin becomes a compact lesson in American priorities and compromises during the late 20th century. Collectors often speak about eye appeal, a term that goes beyond technical perfection. Eye appeal is about how a coin feels when you look at it. Two coins with the same grade can feel completely different. One might glow with natural luster and balanced color, while another looks dull or lifeless. A 1986 D-penny with strong eye appeal can stand out even among higher-grade examples. This subjective quality is part of what makes the market unpredictable and fascinating. Value is not just assigned by numbers. It is shaped by emotion and perception. Another dimension of the coin's story lies in the simple fact that pennies were used so heavily. Unlike higher denominations that might sit in drawers or jars, pennies circulated relentlessly. They were given as change, lost, recovered, reused. This constant movement increased wear, but also increased their presence in daily life. The 1986 D-penny was part of that endless cycle, participating in millions of tiny transactions that together formed the backbone of the economy. Each transaction, insignificant on its own, contributed to the flow of commerce as years passed. The role of the penny became increasingly symbolic rather than practical. Prices rose, and 1 cent became less meaningful in purchasing power. Yet the penny remained, protected by tradition and sentiment. Coins like the 1986 D represent the endurance of that sentiment. Even when logic suggests removal, emotion resists. This tension between practicality and tradition is deeply human, and it is embedded in the continued existence of the penny long after its economic necessity faded. In the collector market, modern cents occupy a unique space. They are accessible, affordable, and abundant, yet they still offer challenges and rewards. Building a complete set of high-grade Lincoln Memorial cents is far from easy. It requires patience, knowledge, and sometimes luck. The 1986 D-penny is a crucial piece of that puzzle, representing a specific moment in the series. For collectors pursuing completeness, it is not optional. It is essential. There is also the idea of legacy. Coins outlive the people who use them. A 1986 D-penny could still exist 100 years from now, long after the hands that first spent it are gone. It will silently carry the date, the design, and the mint mark forward, offering future collectors a tangible link to the late 20th century. That sense of endurance gives even a humble cent a kind of quiet dignity. Speculation often surrounds coins, and exaggerated values are sometimes mentioned in popular stories. While realistic market prices for the 1986 D-penny remain modest for most examples, the excitement generated by such stories plays a role in keeping interest alive. They encourage people to look more closely, to learn, to question assumptions. In that sense, even unrealistic claims serve a purpose by drawing attention to numismatics and inspiring curiosity. Ultimately, the 1986 D-1 cent coin teaches a simple but profound lesson. Importance is not always tied to size or cost. Something small, common, and seemingly insignificant can carry layers of meaning when viewed through time. History does not only belong to rare artifacts locked in museums. It also lives in everyday objects that once passed unnoticed through countless hands. And as we move closer to the conclusion of this long narrative, the 1986 D penny continues to reveal itself not as a coin of great monetary value, but as a coin of great cultural and historical resonance, quietly waiting for the next generation to discover it. As this long journey reaches its final movement, the 1986 D1 cent coin stands quietly at the intersection of past, present, and future, asking nothing of us except a moment of attention. What began as an object created purely for utility slowly transforms, through time and reflection, into something richer. The penny was never designed to be glamorous, never meant to inspire awe, yet its endurance has given it a voice that speaks softly but persistently. The 1986 D-cent is part of that voice, one note in a long and continuous song of American coinage. When you think about how many hands this coin may have passed through, the number becomes almost impossible to imagine. Cashiers, drivers, children, collectors, travelers, strangers who never met and never knew they were connected by this single object. Each transaction was fleeting, but together they form a chain of human interaction. The coin became a silent participant in daily life, witnessing moments of joy, stress, routine, and change. In that sense, it absorbed history not through grand events, but through repetition and presence. The design itself reinforces this quiet permanence. Abraham Lincoln's face has looked out from the penny for more than a century, outlasting wars, economic crises, technological revolutions, and cultural shifts. The Lincoln Memorial on the reverse of the 1986 D penny mirrors that endurance, a monument built to last, translated into metal small enough to fit in a pocket. Together, these images anchor the coin in ideas of unity, resilience, and memory. Even as styles change and new designs emerge, the Lincoln cent remains instantly recognizable. There is also a sense of humility in the penny story. Unlike gold or silver coins that were hoarded and admired from the start, the penny was used, worn, and often discarded. Its value was never assumed. It had to earn relevance through sheer persistence. The 1986 D penny exemplifies this humility. It did its job without fanfare, circulating endlessly, losing luster, gaining scratches, aging quietly. Only later did people begin to look back and realize that something so ordinary could still matter. As society moves further into a digital future, physical coins take on new meaning. They become tactile reminders of a time when value had weight, sound, and texture. The soft clink of coins, the feel of metal between fingers, the habit of checking change. These experiences fade, but coins like the 1986 D penny preserve them. Holding one today can feel almost nostalgic, even for those who lived through its era, because it represents habits and rhythms that are disappearing in the end. The market price of most 1986 D pennies remains modest. Only the finest, rarest examples achieve significant monetary value. But focusing only on price misses the deeper point. Coins are storytellers, and this one tells a story of transition, from copper to zinc, from heavy cash use to digital payments, from unquestioned utility to symbolic presence. It captures a moment when the penny was still alive in everyday commerce, yet already beginning its slow journey toward obsolescence. For collectors, historians, or even casual viewers, the 1986 D1 cent coin offers an invitation. An invitation to look closer at the small things. An invitation to understand how mass-produced objects can still carry individuality. An invitation to see history not just in textbooks or museums, but in the simplest items that once passed through our lives unnoticed. And so this story ends where it began, with a single coin in the palm of your hand. Light catches its surface, revealing Lincoln's familiar profile and the quiet lines of the memorial. It weighs almost nothing, costs almost nothing, yet holds decades of movement, memory, and meaning. The 1986 D penny may never be the most valuable coin in monetary terms, but it stands as proof that value is not always about rarity or price. Sometimes, value is about connection to a time, a place, a people, and a shared history that continues to echo long after the coin itself has stopped circulating.